Lights, camera, action.
Welcome back, everyone, for the special Halloween edition of Popcorn Diaries, where we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, zombies. More particularly, George Romero's career that kicked off the zombie revolution everywhere. Zombie movies have been around for quite a long time, longer than anybody really realizes. Back in 1932, we had the first zombie movie called White Zombie. And ever since then, we've continued to make zombie movies time and time again. But they didn't really become popular until 1968 when Night of the Living Dead hit theaters and just took the nation by storm.
Yep, that pretty much started it all.
We can tell that in the last decade, the increase in zombie popularity has really, really exploded.
Yes, it has.
I mean, you've got popular shows like The Walking Dead, who has been going strong for the past 6-7 years. We've had zombie movies galore, including big-budget franchises like World War Z.
Yeah, great movie.
Zombieland.
Yeah, Zombieland, yeah, favorite
Maggie. There. Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead, yeah.
There's just something that we love about zombies. There's just something about it that it's terrifying, and at the same time, we all love to watch these zombie films. I'm sure there are many of you out there just like me that watches these movies and takes note. Hey, double tap. Got to make sure that the zombie's dead. Work on your cardio. Got to make sure that you can run faster than the other guy or do something like that. So every one of us has a nice little zombie survival plan at these points.
Yep, get them in the head.
Get them in the head. Always take them out. That's the fastest way to know that they are gone. And it all comes down to Romero. Romero was really the one who brought this about, and so we want to talk about his career. We really want to focus on what he has brought to the table since 1968.
Yeah, and what a great career he has had. And it's almost exclusively zombie-type horror movies. He hasn't done a tender love story, folks, and he's not about to.
No.
And that, but you're right, absolutely right. Yeah, with Night of the Living Dead, it was shot for like $100,000 back in 1968, which even back then was nothing for a movie. It was shot in the woods outside of Pittsburgh. And who would have thought this would have ever steamrolled into how popular zombie movies and the whole zombie craze is now? And what's not to love about a good zombie movie?
Yeah.
He did a great job back then. It was black and white. It was creepy. It was unexpected. Really, no one was really ready for what he was about to throw out there. And I think that's what caught everybody by surprise. Because before that, you had some cheap films. You had all that crummy stuff in the 50s and the 60s that really didn't do it in that. So, yeah, credit to him for, arguably could be his best movie even.
Yeah, a popular and classic movie that it is played every year on television. I mean, it's now in the public domain.
Yes, it is.
So it's been around and televised everywhere. And it's so captivating, And I think that the reason it is captivating is because there was attention to the story.
Yes.
And that's what really always makes or breaks a film, is if there is a story, you're going to be interested and you're going to keep watching. If there's not a story, if this was just for gore and special effects, this movie would not have made it off the ground.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those out there, unfortunately, because, the dark side of horror movies and zombie movies in particular is they're relatively straightforward and easy to shoot. You just find a creepy location, get a bunch of creepy people, throw a bunch of makeup and blood on them, and tell them never die and just keep coming. You can get going in that business fairly straightforward, but what separates George from the rest of the pack is great storytelling.
Yeah. That's probably why this is one of his most successful films, is because this script was rock solid. Everything came to play perfectly. There were some accidents here and there on set, but that's par for the course. We all know that trying to get anything onto film is always going to be a challenge.
Yeah, big challenge.
This was actually one of the first movies in history to ever portray a violent murder, because they are killing these zombies, which they never even actually stated that they were zombies. They just called them the things out there,
Right.
or,
And, and that's what made it creepy because they just kept coming.
Yeah.
I mean, you really didn't know what these things were, but, no matter what you did, they just got up and kept coming at you. And what I particularly love about this is the opening scene, where they're at the graveyard and, they drive up in the car. And right away, I mean, what are we, in a minute or two in the movie, and you see the guy in the background looking creepy. And you just know right from there, man, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
And it never lets up from there.
Yeah, and I mean, he took a gamble because he shot this in black and white in a time where color was the norm, where everybody was like, oh, it's all about color, because color had just come out recently, really within the last 10 years before this. So everybody was all about the, Technicolor, and everything was deep, rich colors. And here he comes out with this black and white gritty film. It was a real gamble for him to do this. And there were some distributors that didn't want to touch this film because of the fact that it was in black and white. But this worked for the film because it gave it an even creepier aspect. Not to mention that, I'm guessing some of the reasons that they decided to go in black and white was for the makeup. Because it was hard to kind of get those reds to really pop back in those days. So the black and white really worked for this film.
Yeah, I can't imagine this film in anything but black and white. I mean, it was the perfect choice for it. I think one of the interesting things about this movie is, most of the actors that were in this movie were unknown.
Yes.
And believe it or not, most of them had gone on to somewhat of a career in acting, some more than others, but they pretty much all stayed in the horror genre, if you will, which is interesting. I'm not going to run down the list of the names because you probably wouldn't recognize any of them, honestly, folks. But they all made somewhat of a career out of their start in The Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah. And then he did a couple other movies. And then in 1978, he came back a decade later with Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, you got to love Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, yeah. Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorites. Dario Argento, who is also a famous director of horror films, was such a great fan of Romero that he actually asked him to come to Romania and write the script there. He wanted to take care of him. He helped him out. This really was a little bit of a co-op between Dario and George. So that's such a great thing to see that, people respect each other, they work together, and this film was just so much fun. It was. I mean, there were some comedic moments in this. This is one of the first times that you start to see a little bit of comedy coming into play with the whole zombie thing.
Yeah.
They had some makeup issues going on. If you recall, some of the zombies looked kind of blue.
Yeah. Well,
It was kind of funny to see that. But there were so many things that, just kept coming in this movie. You had biker gangs. You had police. It's just so well done. I really love this movie. It's always been one of my favorites.
Yeah, I'm glad he made the switch over to color. Okay, that made a big impact. And I think, putting this thing in a shopping mall was just absolutely perfect by, shutting these guys in because now you got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And the whole place is surrounded by zombies. And they're everywhere. There's a lot of them. So he definitely upped the ante there. And it just, there's comedy in here. But then it just switches right off and it goes right into gore.
Yeah.
So he does a great job there. You do, believe it or not, care about some of the actors, as hard as that is to do sometimes in zombie movies. And there's some folks in there that, that actually went on to bigger careers outside of the horror genre, if you will. Successful movie made for about $26 million and has pulled in over $100 million to date. So not a bad return on that guy.
I think one of the great things about this movie was some of the quieter scenes, where they lock themselves in this mall. And at first, it's all fun and games because, they've got the run of the place.
We can go grab stuff.
Exactly. But, people don't realize that getting shut in quickly becomes tiresome. You don't get to see other people. You don't interact with other people. And no matter how much you have around you, being alone is not the greatest of things.
Yeah.
And you start to see that a little bit in the film. And that really, really hits home when you start to realize that if you find yourself alone and stranded and locked in, you've got only yourself for company.
Yeah, and then he took advantage of what happens all the time when you get a group or a small group of people, kind of captured, if you will. Somebody always tries to gain control.
Exactly.
So now you've got that layer of all kinds of chaos going on, and who's the boss and who's going to take orders and that type of thing, and everything just gets built up in tension even that much more. And on top of that, you got zombies beating on the door.
Yeah. One of his better films, I think.
I do agree there. And folks, if you haven't seen it and you're a fan of the zombie genre, definitely check it out. Keep an eye out for the helicopter scene.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorites.
Well, following in the series came Day of the Dead in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the movies that had more news reportings in it.
Mm-hmm.
The other two kind of had a little bit of, we hear from the radio, we hear a little bit of television broadcast. This one kind of brought in the newspaper element and more television into it, really trying to get the audience to realize that this was not just something that was local, but national, that was going on everywhere, that there was no escape from it, that wherever you planned to go, it was there.
Yeah, and you got to remember in the story, the zombies basically were ruling the planet.
Yes,
they weren't just in a town or kind of hiding out somewhere. They had the whole thing, and so you had this small group of scientists and military folks who are basically hiding from them.
Yes,
and a bit of a different storyline instead of just trying to avoid them and everything like that. You can't avoid them in this movie. They are everywhere, and that builds a lot of tension in this movie, and it works very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like this was the movie that really said, hey, these are the zombies, and they're here to stay.
Yeah, and if you look at today, especially with the popularity of The Walking Dead and similar, it's the same kind of thing. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, now they may not be in mass everywhere, but every time you turn around, they seem to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get to start to see the hordes of zombies. Before we had a horde of zombies, but they were in the hundreds. Here we start to see where, hey, they might be in the thousands. And there's no getting around that. Small group of people against a horde of zombies equals carnage.
Yeah,
and you see that.
You're gonna lose that contest, no doubt about it. And the zombies have gotten smarter.
Yeah.
They're faster moving. When you look at Night of the Living Dead from back in 1968, they were very slow moving. I mean, you could outrun these guys with just walking fast. But as time goes on, they're getting smarter. They're thinking. They know where you are, and they move fast.
Yeah.
And it gets to be a lot more challenging to try to avoid not becoming one of them.
And I think one of the things that makes his franchise so successful and so iconic is the fact that he never really reveals how it all came about. He leaves it in mystery. There have been theories and rumors, the whole satellite Venus thing and whatever, but he never really intentionally says, one, the word zombie, or two, how it came about. You're always left with this mystery of how could this happen and could it happen today?
Yeah, that's true, because most zombie movies today, even the latest ones that have come out, it usually falls of, it was some sort of experiment that went bad or a virus got loose, or something like that. But you're right. In this one, you really don't know what triggered the entire event.
Yeah. And then following that up, he had a kind of a hiatus. He did a couple other films, but he came back in 2005 after the release of Shaun of the Dead in 2004 and came back with Land of the Dead. And he was so enamored of Shaun of the Dead from the year before that he actually invited Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright from Shaun of the Dead to be in the movie. And they prominently appear in a lot of the artwork that you see in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell George is just a zombie fan. And not only does he create zombie movies, but he is a fan of the zombie genre.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's why he is pretty much stuck with that as you look at his career, even from that time up to present day.
This is the first time that he kind of hints at where the zombie outbreak might have come from. In the opening credits, we do have a montage of images that kind of detail the outbreak.
Yeah.
But again, he still keeps it very vague. And I think that works for this series. I think that makes the series so successful because it just can happen anytime, any place.
And, you need that kind of mystery to really kind of keep you captivated when you watch something like this. Because if you know everything up front, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, virus hit, bunch of zombies running around. You got the star. He's not going to die because he's the star. And they're just going to go wipe out bodies left and right.
This was actually one of the first films that George employed the use of digital effects. Up until this era, he really did not use any digital effects. It was all makeup work done by one of the greatest makeup artists in the horror genre who stayed with George throughout this whole series, which we haven't even talked about. But Tom Savini is the one who has really brought these zombies to life. And this was the first time that they actually used some digital effects, and it's mainly in the blood and some of the nastier gore sequences of this movie.
Yeah, blood is a tough one in the movies. You just think, oh, you just get some red stuff and just put it on somebody and everything like that.
No.
But, you've got movie lights going and you've got different temperatures. It runs, it doesn't run. It's very, very hard to do. And so I have no issue with him making that small switch just to, keep everything
not
going.
to mention that there are many scenes where the actors have to interact with the blood. You've got the carnage scenes where they're putting stuff in their mouth. You can't really ask them to put something that is going to be harmful to their body in their mouth. Those are some of the issues that you have to overcome as a makeup artist, is trying to figure out how to make it look believable, but how to keep it safe for the actors that have to ingest it. George has continued his career, and he turned around fairly quickly, and brought out Diary of the Dead. Now, this movie is kind of a weird thing because it begins on the same day as Night of the Living Dead, but it was portrayed in present times. So he had to really update that whole situation for the present time. I saw this movie a couple of times, and it's not one of his strongest works. This is really when he struggled a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of middle of the road.
Yeah, it's not that great of a film, but it's a George Romero classic. You have to watch it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it was well done in the way that the concept was brought up for present day. We did have him also, again, appearing in the film. He was actually a police officer that was trying to cover up the zombie outbreak. So then there we start to get some of the other aspects of what's going on, or what might happen when zombie outbreaks happen or plagues happen, is how sometimes governments think that they can get a handle on things.
Yep, and they cover it up.
Control everything.
Don't tell everybody.
Don't panic.
Yeah.
We'll be fine. We'll get it under control. And next thing you know, it's a zombie on camera.
Yep.
So these are some of the social aspects that I love that zombie movies bring about, is that we think about not only ourselves in those situations, but what happens to the world, what happens to our governments, what happens to our behavior towards our fellow man.
Yep.
And that's something that we see a lot of today when we watch a series like The Walking Dead. They really hit those issues. They really talk about how people change in situations.
Sure.
You have people that have gone through traumas that, have had to kill other people, regardless if they're zombies or not. They're people that were living once.
Yes, they were.
That all impacts a person, So those are some great things that I love to see about the zombie genre.
Yeah, it's one thing you don't think about. You think about just people running around just, surviving and killing zombies and that. But, if you put yourself, in their place, you definitely would be a changed person.
You have to be.
Yeah, it's a good thing that zombies aren't really running around, folks.
It is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
And then he finally capped his series off in 2009 with Survival of the Dead.
Yeah.
Arguably, this is his weakest movie.
Yeah, this one was not that strong.
It was a bit strange.
Yeah.
And this is the first time in his series, at least, where they were looking for more of a cure than how to control the zombies like they did in Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
But they were kind of looking for a way to cure it, and it didn't work out.
No, and that's pretty much a storyline that has developed even going forward now. It seems like more and more everyone's looking for, how do we fix this? Mm-hmm. And this movie's no different. I mean, they're stuck on an island, and the zombies are running around the island, and they've got loved ones that turned into zombies, and they're hanging on to them because they're gonna fix it. So I don't care what anybody says. Once you're a zombie, you're not coming back.
No,
you're not coming back. But it is interesting to see that this was probably one of the first, if not the first movie that was looking for the cure.
No matter what, no matter how you put it or which way you look at it, there is no coming back from zombieism. So if you haven't seen any of these films, definitely check them out. You can't know where the genre came from unless you look at George Romero. So take a look at all these films. There's so many coming in the future. The zombies are not dead. They are not going away.
No, they are not going to go away.
As far as George, I don't know if he has it in him to do another film.
Well, he's got really nothing on the slate right now. He's just kind of laying back. And I think there's a documentary that they're working on, but that's a documentary.
Yeah, but I mean, George is in his 70s already, so I don't know. I don't think he has another one in him, but he may surprise us. You never know.
It would be nice to see him do a cameo in something, Walking Dead. Come on, pull him in. Have him be somebody for 5 minutes.
Definitely. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this Halloween edition of Popcorn Diaries. May you survive the zombie apocalypse. Definitely get out your kits and your tool belts because you will need them if that ever happens. Thank you for being with us today. As always, I'm Adriana.
And I'm Joe.
And this was Popcorn Diaries.